Mangroves provide a natural sea defense and are known to prevent erosion along the coastline.
It's a very good thing for the wall, for the sea dam, for Brockway, for go away and damage the people and land and everything. Because if you break away, all about it go flood out, all over the place. So that's it, then plant them for.
Right.
So then got it for daddy savior. When the water come in big, you cut them, you not give a flash over the wall like how before we used to flash over.
Additionally though, mangroves provide a habitat for various animal species, including fish, which forms a part of our daily diet. Annette Arjun Martin, a local conservationist and president of the Guyana Marine Conservation Society, has spent years advocating for the conservation of mangroves, but also for a greater awareness of how the animals and people benefit from these. Ahead of World Mangrove Day, observed on July 26, she sat down with the newsroom to share some of the lessons learned over the years and imperatives for the future.
But because Georgetown and most of our coastline is 7 feet below sea level, and we're very prone to flooding as we would have experienced, especially extreme flooding of late, the most visible importance of mangroves to most Guyanese is its role in mitigating against flooding in some areas. So where you have mangrove forests, the energy of the waves, when they hit the mangroves dissipate the energy, so it doesn't hit the seawall or the coastline as hard and doesn't speed up the erosion of the mud and the mud banks in front of it. So they really, in a way, serve as like a green sea defense. I like to refer it as nature's sea defense. Another very important role is that it serves as an important nursery for our fisheries sector. So most fishes, when they're reproducing, the small fishes, the juvenile, would normally hide out in the roots of the mangrove forests to keep away from predators, which would obviously eat them up. And then, the impact to our fisheries inventory would be felt. So they hide out in the roots of the mangroves until they're big enough to go out, and then of course get big enough to roam the coastal zones or the ocean. Well, mangrove forests, because they grow so quickly, they sequester or store 5 times as much carbon as the forest you would find inland. So in a time of climate change, in a time of global warming, rising sea level, and the need to have these important carbon sinks intact, the third very important role of mangroves is its carbon sequestration value.
Along the coastal plain where the mainland of Guyana meets the Atlantic Ocean, mangrove forests can be found. They also line river banks, but importantly, the largest intact mangrove forests are found in Region 1 at the Birima-Mora Passage.
In terms of the Birima-Mora Passage, it is largely inhabited by Waraos. So Waraos are one of the 9 indigenous peoples in Guyana, and they always have inhabited the Orinoco Delta in Venezuela and the Birima-Mora Passage area, where they are they are accustomed to living in swampy conditions. So they don't have, because the mangroves are there, it's not like a seawall as we know it in Region 4. So they're accustomed to living in these swampy conditions. So in terms of the actual protection from the sea, they would tend to live within the mangroves. So they're very much part of the whole mangrove ecosystem. And this is what makes it very special. So we have 6 IUCN red listed species there, which is a huge deal. Imagine, who would have thought that you have giant anteaters in a mangrove swamp? We have giant anteaters, giant river otters, jaguars, pumas. I mean, amazing wildlife, some of them very, very, very important.
Part of the Conservation Society's team is Felicia Collins, a recently graduated marine biologist who grew up in Port Kaituma in Region 1. Collins has returned to the region and has spent some time conducting research on the animals found there and how the wildlife and mangrove forests interact with the indigenous Waro people. Speaking to the newsroom from Region 1, Collins emphasized that research would provide a greater understanding of the ecosystems.
Our mangrove forests are not totally understood, and there hasn't been much research done here in the Northwest in general. Most of our research comes from the South, and that's because, transportation, it's easier. There's already pre-existing data to build on there. However, conservation needs a holistic approach. So if we are going to make meaningful efforts, then we need to have more research being done in areas that it's never been done before, which includes the Northwest and other places such as Region 7, Region 6. We need to understand what is out there before we can protect it.
Within the conversation on climate change and rising sea levels, for example, mangroves become all the more important. Yet, the conservation of mangroves must also be balanced with Guyana's developmental trajectory and, at the very basic level, satisfying the needs of people. In Region 1, for example, the Waro people depend on the mangroves in the Brima-Mora Passage for their livelihoods. They use it for the construction of their houses. They eat some of the animals that live among the mangroves, and, in some cases, it provides a source of income.
In our work, we have always been very pragmatic. You cannot have tunnel vision and just look at protecting the natural resources and not caring about the people. Actually, the natural resources will not succeed in its protection unless you get the people involved. And I always use my own personal analogy, right? So I have 2 kids, and if me digging up the last 2 sea turtle eggs meant my kids could eat, I would do it. So when you're looking at resource use that might be unsustainable, you have to look at finding an alternative source of protein. For example, if you wanted to have people stop digging up the eggs, well then what is the alternative source of protein you will help them to be able to get easier. In terms of the wildlife trapping, for example, these Waros don't have any other viable source of income, so they're doing it to just survive. And in some horrible cases, you also have the instances where young girls are having survival sex, because that's the only thing they could, do to eat or to get the next meal. So in terms of my personal approach, as well as the approach of the Guyana Marine Conservation Society, is we are very pragmatic where it comes to the developmental needs of the country, the employment opportunities to a very large population of unemployed people, especially the hinterland people that don't have much employment opportunities, and how do we find a balance.
Still, the conservationist believes that tangible efforts can be made to advance conservation efforts locally, since projects like the Low Carbon Development Strategy, LCDS, which will be expanded by the Air Finale-led government, provide a sound framework. Already, Keen Mosley, project coordinator of the Mangroves Department at the National Agriculture Research and Extension Institute NARI, says that works are underway to ensure that there's corporate buy-in of conservation efforts.
Our restoration interventions are not primarily only on seedling planting. In areas where it's not possible to do seedling planting, we construct sediment traps or groins. In 2018, as part of our annual program, we constructed a bamboo brushwood dam at Aberdeen in Colombia because the elevation and the condition of the foreshore was not suitable to support mangroves. Since then, we've been monitoring the site, and we partnered with Tulo Oil Guyana and Guyanese Women in Development to fund a seedling planting project this year, as the conditions at the site, based on our monitoring, indicate that it's now suitable to support mangroves. So to speed up that process, we're doing seedling planting.
Certainly, the next few years will see an advanced pace of developmental efforts in Guyana, and research and advocacy continues to ensure that the country can pursue the balanced development articulated. Reporting for the newsroom, I am Vishani Raghavir.